Check, good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association Podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, trying to do the coolest thing and find the coolest people around. This week we are in Fabtech Canada here in Toronto Congress Centre. We've been doing interviews for the last 2 days. We're having a great time. The show floor is packed. The building is sold out. CanWeld sessions are rolling. Everything's going well. Right now I got Jeremy Belair from APR Welding Academy. How you doing?
Very good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. I'm a little tired. Day 2, day 3. More like day 21, I feel
Late
like.
night last night?
Yeah. Well, let's not talk about that. But it was a very good time for the CWS, Canada Welding Supply VIP party last night.
Yep.
Thanks, CWS. What brings you to the show, Jeremy? What are you doing here?
So I'm here checking out the latest and greatest technology. Having a fun time checking out everything that's new and that's out there, and press brakes, lasers. It's awesome.
So, are you more interested in the fab side or in the welding side?
Honestly, both. So as far as you know, I own a welding academy.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is teach the next thing that's going to be big, right? So the laser welding is starting to come out there. So I like getting the information and seeing it for myself, what it's actually capable of, and where its pros and cons are, right?
Yeah.
As well as we teach the fabricating side of things. So teaching them to use the equipment that is safer, more versatile, easier to learn. That's also something that I want to look towards as well.
So, you mentioned that you own APR Welding Academy. Tell us what that is. What is your welding academy? What do you teach? And then we'll go from there.
All right. So APR Welding Academy is a private career college that focuses mainly on fabricating and welding. We also get into pipe welding, specialty welding, things like that. And our focus is trying to change the way that somebody learns, right?
Mm-hmm.
The things they learn, the way they learn, different teaching techniques. And because we're private, we don't have to go and get certified by anybody. We basically submit it into our private career college, and we get it certified from a third party. It's a very quick process compared to government processes and things like
Us.
that. Yeah, exactly. So, and we're finding out the things that work, right? Trying to teach confined space welding. That's something you don't really get to learn in school.
Mm-hmm.
And even though legally we're not allowed to actually shove them in a confined space without proper training, we are allowed to simulate it. So simulating things like working off of a gas-powered welding machine. That's something I didn't do until I actually became a pipe welder.
Mm-hmm.
Or running off a suitcase welder. There's a lot of different types of just welding challenges that people
And they're everywhere. It's not like they're unique. They're all over the place.
They're all over the place, exactly. And depending on what type of welding the individual student is going to go into, that depends on generally what they're looking towards, and sometimes their path could change, right?
Yeah.
They might decide, I want to be a pipe welder, and then they get into it, and they're like, I think I'd like to work in a shop with newer technology, or maybe different fabricating equipment, or maybe they might just go into fabricating altogether rather than being even a welder in general. So
yeah. So your background then going into this, because you seem like a fairly young guy, right? And you decide that you want to start up a welding academy. Likely, and I'm just totally guessing, but I will see how I read you here. 2 reasons. One, you saw a need for people to learn a different way, right?
Yep.
And number 2, you were probably a pretty good welder yourself and thought you could teach what you know to people in a different way.
You know what? I got to learn a lot of cool tricks and tips from a lot of older guys that I worked with. And I had the opportunity to actually soak in a lot of this knowledge at a young age, working all across Canada. So these people, I can't thank them enough for the amount of knowledge that they gave me. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to learn it all. So I just kept asking questions, right?
Yeah.
But even after that, I more so got into the fact that I realized that a lot of people don't understand these little tricks and tips and how much they could help you as a welder.
Mm.
So when I was training apprentices, I was part of the local union, United Association's local 508, and then it amalgamated into 800. So I was a pipe welder. I got to weld X-ray. I got to learn a lot of things with even just welding X-ray can be a lot different than welding just normal pipe or structural steel.
Right.
So yeah, I got to learn a lot of things, and I felt that it needed to be out there. It needed. These people that taught me are now retired.
Yeah.
And even if they're not retired, they're tired.
Yeah.
They're not the same
The information's going to go on the way out. Yeah.
And I'm finding that a lot more and more often, that the information's getting lost. You know, it's not getting passed down, and now it was getting lost. So I found myself very open to learning at a young age. And it was mainly because I got humbled. I'm going to be honest. I got humbled at a young age and realized I wasn't as good as I thought I was.
And there's always someone better.
There's always going to be someone better. And you're never going to know everything. So open up your ears a little bit and listen to what they have to teach you.
Yeah. Now,
Help them.
For yourself to be working out there, you're in the welding career, you're learning, you're feeling pretty good. You got your red seal in welding?
Yep.
Did you do your red seal steel fab?
I did it actually. So I did it as a welder, red seal.
Yeah.
However, it was kind of interesting because now they have an actual pipe welder red seal.
They do. They actually always did, but it kind of disappeared and came back.
Exactly.
Yeah. Same with there's a red seal production line welder. Did you know that?
I did actually recently hear about that.
Yeah, it was around
like,
forever,
oh, wow.
and then it's gone, and now it's back. Yeah.
Because they are very different fields.
They are, yeah.
Like when I was doing my trade school and everything, you know, it was very different from what I was doing in the field. Like I was a pipe welder, right? I wasn't a structural welder. I wasn't a shop welder, because that's very different as well.
Or maintenance welder.
Welder.
Very different, yeah.
And that was kind of what I started doing when I came back to town after I worked on the road for so long.
Yeah.
I started working on a local steel plant, Algoma Steel, and that wasn't new construction. It was far from it. So I had to learn almost a new type of welding on rust and welding on steel that wasn't
grease.
Oh my God, yeah.
I worked in a steel mill for like almost 10 years.
Oh my God, yeah.
I was the shutdown guy.
Okay.
So
that's
like
exactly...
maintenance. Some days are nice. You're doing handrails. Some day you're in 6 inches of grease.
Or in an absolutely treacherous heat zone of furnace around
and
you.
Things are flying around.
Oh my God, yeah. And don't get me wrong, it's fun in its own way. Like I did have a lot of fun working there.
People would ask me what work was like. I'm like, have you ever played the game Doom? That's my job.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, it honed my skills pretty damn quick.
Exactly, because you know my entire career I basically focused around being almost a welder as a new construction. So X-ray, a lot of my welds were getting tested one way or another. So after I kind of moved on from that, and I came back home and I started working in not new construction, maintenance, like you were saying, or even like small fab jobs that were, you know, if there's an existing line, you're kind of running a new pipe off that line into another mill. So even that was challenging in its own sense, because you're not set up to be working in a shop and you're doing all the prefab work in almost like a prefabricated shop between a couple of sea cans. You're kind of doing it in the field. If it's raining, you're working in the rain.
You're under a tent or out the back or whatever, right?
Exactly, yeah. So some of the welding I did before that, I worked in the Northwest Territories. So almost everything I did was in a hoarding of some sort, because it was too cold out to be able to weld the material without doing a crazy preheat and post-heat procedure.
Yeah.
So
once you get past minus 40, all the rules change.
Oh my God, yeah. Even your body changes.
Yeah, I remember heating up I-beams in the cold because I'd have to lie on them to weld. So I'd heat the beam up first to lie on a hot beam so I could warm up while I welded.
Yeah, I had a Tiger torch one day because my Herman Nelson that was kind of coming into my hoarding wasn't working properly. It kept running out of diesel, but it was full. So like it kept kind of throwing this code. Well, it was too cold to be messing around with that kind of stuff, so I ended up just grabbing a Tiger torch, shoving it in a pipe that I cut a bunch of holes in, and that was my heating source.
That's your heater, yeah.
So when the guy finally showed up to fix it, he's like, what's going on here? I'm like, I just had to make my own. It was too cold.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was in there in almost a T-shirt because it was so warm inside the hoarding.
So coming in now with the experience you have, and you decide to leap into teaching. I was a teacher for a number of years at the college in Saskatchewan. I never planned on being a teacher. I got pulled into teaching from industry, just sort of happened. And it was a learning curve, man. It was a big change for me. How was it for you?
So I can honestly say the biggest learning curve for me was that I went from being a hard worker and work plenty of hours, and I'd be fine with that. I remember this one particular time I went up to my boss after a 16-hour day, and I said, hey, man, if we're only going to be working part-time, I might have to drag up and find another job. And he looked at me and was like, are you kidding me? You're working 16-hour days, kid. What's wrong with you? And I was there for one reason, right? I was there to work. I enjoyed working, and I was there for the money, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't there to party and hang out with friends after work. You're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So with that being said, now I became a teacher, and as I was teaching, I found that I could work 6 hours that day and be
exhausted,
way more tired than working a 16-hour day. It was it's a totally different animal. It's
the mental drain,
exhausting.
the mental drain. You got to pivot your thoughts every second.
Yes.
Just based on what the kids' needs are. I shouldn't say kids, students' needs are. Every minute is a new challenge where when you're welding and you're on the tools, you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You just go on autopilot. You don't even notice 5 hours goes by.
And you just blank everybody else out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's very different, and you almost never get away from the people, right? Which is fun in a sense, too. But then you get home, you're like, oh, my God, I just want to sit there and pet my dog and not think about anything for 10 minutes.
Talk to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly.
I need silence.
Yeah, silence, please. Everybody leave me alone. And now, of course, I've gotten used to it, right? It's been 4 years now of us taking over the college. And basically, it's almost like I can't wait to go and get to fabricate again and get to go weld on my own.
Yeah.
When 90 people are watching me at one time, it's between all the students and people taking videos and posting them, that there's going to be tons of people watching every move you make.
Yeah.
So as interesting as that could be too, it kind of hones your skills a little bit more, and you never make mistakes now. You went from making an odd mistake every once in a blue moon to like, well, no, there is no room for mistakes now.
You're the one giving the examples.
Exactly.
Right.
And you want to make sure that they're learning the proper techniques. So you're almost double thinking everything, like, okay, well, I want to make sure I'm not teaching anybody bad, habits or anything like that, because obviously as welders, we had our own bad habits, right?
Yeah.
You work in the field every day, so
and we all have our specific habits that work, and sometimes you have to let the students know, like, hey, just because it works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you, right?
That's the biggest thing about being an instructor, and I actually got complimented on that exact thing last week. Somebody who's been a welder for a long time, she was a Boilermaker welder and specialty welder. And she came to do her test, and something just wasn't working for her. She just wasn't having a great time. She wasn't learning, not learning, but her test wasn't going the way she had hoped.
Yeah.
But I reminded her, you don't weld as much as you used to when you were a Boilermaker welder. Now you're a mill worker, and you work with multiple people. So, you're not always going to be the welder anymore.
Yeah.
So I kind of gave her a couple different techniques, and the one I gave her just wasn't working for her.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, no problem. We're going to try this out now. So I gave her a different technique, and I didn't really explain too much because I didn't want her to get in her head. And it worked really well for her.
Yeah.
And I was like, there you go. Like, this is yours now. Like, this is for you to use. And she called me after, like, because she was stressed out. It was a TSSA test that she was doing.
Yeah. Like the initial 6 or a recert?
It was a recert, yeah.
Right,
So she actually did her initial one the year before because she didn't ever prior to have a pipe ticket. She was a Boilermaker, so she
had to come back for right from the start.
Almost, and that's what she felt like. She was like, "Oh my God, I've been welding longer than you've been alive," and she said that about me. And I'm like, "You're not wrong," and it's okay though. We're gonna work through it, right?
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing with being an instructor is like knowing what works for certain people and trial and erroring it and remembering what you've taught them that didn't work, right? So you can kind of figure out what does work.
So did you pull the school right out of the ground? Were you like, hey, I want to start a school, and then you're out there looking for properties? Or like, how did it play out?
So basically, when I was a pipe welder, I moved back home and I started working in the steel plant, like I had said. So while I was working in the steel plant, I've always had a dream of starting a fab shop.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what I started doing was I started planning financially and mentally to start my own fab shop. So one of the biggest things that was a goal of mine was that I wanted to have a CNC plasma table. I remember using them in college, never got to use them.
You kind of need it for everything now.
Oh, man. And they're so much fun. You could build so many cool things with them. So I honestly bought it originally as like, I'm going to put this in my garage and I'm going to use it when I feel like. Maybe I'll make some fire pits to make some money on the side or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Well, I ended up getting really good at the specialty welding side of things and utilizing the plasma table to kind of offset all the the things that would make it take too long
Right.
in order to make it feasible for cost-wise. So I utilized that table and then bought some small machines, like a small Miller diversion TIG welder. I bought a small Lincoln wire feed welder.
Like an MP210 or something.
Yeah, except it was old. It was
an
I don't
older
remember.
one.
I want to say it was a 200 and something. It was actually big for being in my garage, but it still ran off a 220 30 amp breakers. So I was like, sweet, I could use it in my garage because that's where I was limited to, was my garage. Right?
Yeah.
And luckily, I bought this house actually with the plan to eventually have this equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up getting so busy after work that it started interfering with my life. You know, like it was like I was working crazy hours, and then I'd get off work and
work some more.
And now work some more, which I loved it. It was still a hobby. It was different from what I was doing at work because I was pipe welder, and at that time I was actually a foreman. But it was
It's still time.
Yeah, and I wish there was more time in a day. To be
Yeah,
honest,
yeah.
I'm one
That's
of those
the thing.
people.
You run out of time.
You run out of time. So essentially, what I ended up doing was making the decision to quit my job and pursue the fab shop full time.
Yeah.
And when I did that, it worked. It was awesome. I had a good crew of guys. I started doing powder coating, and I started looking into like very specialty work. I did a lot of aluminum welding, a lot of stainless welding, thin stainless, things like that. And then I was just at my welding supplier, and I was looking to get gas, whatever, just refilling all the bottles for the guys. And one of the instructors was at the school, which was in the same parking lot as our welding supplier. So basically, the guy that was teaching at the college, I used to work with. And I loved him. He was a great guy.
Yeah.
He worked in the steel plant. He was actually trying to get me to take over his job in the steel plant when he retired. And then it just ended up, the steel plants don't work like that. It's all union. You get posted and you
put
work
your
way
time
up.
in.
Yeah. So the job he had was like the best job in there. So there was no way I was going to get that job. But he pushed for it. He did try.
Yeah.
So anyway, then I started my company after that, obviously. So then he kind of seen that I was doing well with the shop, and I had guys working for me, and we were doing really well. So basically, he was like, hey, I would really love for you to come talk to my class. Like, they're apprentices that you were teaching when you were a pipe welder. I'm like, oh, cool, right on. I could definitely come talk
That'd
to
be
them.
fun,
Yeah. See how they're doing, see what they're up to, see where they're working. You know, I know all the companies around town. So I went over there, and as I was, like, kind of walking through the shop talking to all these guys, I was looking around, and, like, I used to do my testing in this school. So when I was doing TSSA testing, CWB testing, I would go to this school, which was APR. So as I was floating around there, I was like, man, this guy's got a lot of nice equipment that I never realized before because I was just a pipe welder, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And now that I look at it from a different perspective as actually being...
Oh, that's a nice break. Or he's got a pyramid roller.
Yeah.
Like, there's toys in here.
There's
like,
lots of toys in here that I could build some really cool things with.
Yeah.
Forget making money with it. I could make some really
Do you
cool
have
stuff.
a mandrel bender?
Yeah. Yeah, he had an awesome tube bender. Like,
Yeah,
oh, man, it was super cool. So I was like, man, you have some really nice equipment in this shop. And he's like, why don't you buy the place? Literally just like that. And I'm like, interesting. It's for sale? And he's like, yeah, it's for sale. You know, I'm at that age. I'm looking to retire. So the backstory on that is he started APR in 1997 when the college locally got rid of the welding department. So he's seen that there was still a need for it. So he ended up starting up the company on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
But started up with like some welding machines and the welding booth. He just started as a private career college. Well, over the years, he got certified to do literally everything. Like, we got more certifications than our local college does now as far as training goes, right? And testing and everything. So basically, he ended up building it up to quite a very niche kind of school. Very
Specialized, yeah.
Specialized, yeah, thank you. So then, basically, I was looking at it, I'm not gonna lie, I looked at it as buying it just for the equipment. I was like, okay, the school's for sale, great. I built my dream job though, right?
Yeah.
So I was looking at it financially and everything, and reading the financials and going through it all with my business partner, and he was like, well, I mean, you know, why do you want to shut the school down? I said, well, it's not necessarily that I want to shut the school down. It just, I built my dream job. I just want the equipment.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, but think about like what you could do with this. So he didn't really elaborate on that. He just left it open-ended. And I'm like, you know what? I will think about it. So I started thinking about it more and more and talking with my wife, Alyssa. And she was like, well, I mean, you could enjoy it. It has its benefits, right?
Yeah.
You could change the way education is perceived and given. And, you know, I mean, there's things that you can change. And she's like, you're a good welder. I mean, you could go and teach all the things that you've learned. I was like, yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
So basically what I did was I promised myself and her that I would try it for a year. Nothing, you can't learn anything and really give something a solid try without at least doing it for a year.
Yeah.
In my mind. So I did. I gave it 100% of myself for that full year. And after that, I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like all the things that I used to have to watch how long something took to make sure that a customer wasn't overpaying or, my boss was always on top of me for certain things. Now I literally got to do the things I always wanted to do, but at the same time teach somebody else how to do it.
Yeah, you're just doing your thing.
I'm literally doing my thing.
And they're learning your thing.
Yeah, exactly. and it's so much fun. Like the projects we get to do and the things we get to build and, the creative things we get to do, like making jigs for certain machines to make them do things they're really not designed to do, but it's not unsafe to do it, right?
Yeah.
These are things they actually have to do in the field, whether they're working in a shop or in the field, right? So I like to give my students a lot of almost room for creativity. Like if we're creating a jig, I want you to tell me what the best way to do it is by using the equipment that is in our shop, and the most efficient way of doing it as well. So basically, yeah, I mean, I really get to, and I've learned so much just since taking over the school. Like,
well, teaching really makes you learn.
It does.
It really fast because you don't want to get caught flat-footed.
No.
Right?
And not only that, I mean, it's like you do so much more research because you have a purpose behind it.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny because before I ever owned the school, I found myself doing a lot of research on things that I just enjoyed, like the plasma table. I learned that thing so fast because I followed like 20 different forums all at the same time. I just started hyper-obsessing over like what people were doing, what worked for them, what didn't work for them.
Yeah.
I didn't want the manufacturer's specifications of how to do something. I wanted their opinion.
The superstar ones.
The superstar, exactly. The guy that kills it on everything. Like, how do you remove mill scale quickly? Why are we all like, So like you don't grind anything anymore, right? And it's just like it saves you from prepping for paint. And like, so there's so many little tricks out there that the company's not going to necessarily tell you how to do it because they have a tool for that too.
Yeah, they have a tool for that. Yeah.
So I mean, I found a lot of things like that. Started collabing with the fact that now I'm teaching these things. Like, so this is how you do it by the book. Okay, guys, now that you learn that, you know how to do it safely. Now I'm going to teach you how to do this to make your life a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And it works, right? And it helps them in the field in the long run.
So you take over the school. Did you keep the staff? The guy who wanted to retire, did he stay?
So no, actually.
Or did he go?
It was kind of funny because everybody that had currently worked there. Just to put this into perspective for a minute, this was during COVID.
Of course.
So it was like the worst time to buy a school.
Well, at least there's no students showing up right away.
No, and there was classes going on, but we had to learn to pivot to go online. And that's actually where CWB came into play quite a bit. At the time, CWB was just getting into the Acorn modules that they had online. So we used that. We benefited from it quite a bit. It helped our students a lot. And then we kind of read the fine print of what the ministry was allowing us to do at the time. And they were like, well, if it's anything hands-on and you need it to be hands-on, well, that's basically like they have to do it. Like, great, that's awesome. So 50% of our training is in person. Yeah. So now all the online stuff we're going to do online, but everything in person we're going to be doing
on
in
the tools.
shop.
Yeah.
So there's no classroom now. So it's kind of like we're online with the students, going through their modules with them.
Yeah.
But then we get to come into the shop and still do the welding side of things. So I mean, it was interesting. It was a huge learning curve, but nobody lost anything during that. At least at APR, like we made sure that the students were still getting the learning, getting to ask questions, But then especially when we're in the shop, they really were hyper focused on being in the shop because it's not like they sat in the classroom for half the day and then had to go to the shop.
They're not tired. They're not bored. They're fresh.
They're excited to be there because they've been sitting at home doing nothing for the whole week until that point, right? So
you're teaching CWB curriculum for some stuff during that. I don't know if you still are, but
yeah.
But you say that you're kind of like in the private college sphere. I work with a few private colleges. In Canada, we're still pretty tightly regulated as a private college. There's still quite a few rules. But then you compare that to private colleges out of the U.S., where it's the Wild West. You can teach whatever you want. Literally the Wild West. For yourself, how do you structure what you do without being the same as the other schools, but still fit into those pieces? Because there's still an expectation that you're going to have to be able to fit in pieces with other people, right?
Yeah, so basically the private career college, we have to submit a curriculum. So that curriculum gets submitted to a third party and then gets approved by the ministry with that third party. So they kind of work hand in hand to make sure that it's approved for what we're actually teaching and providing the training that we are supposed to be providing to make it basically a level playing ground for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So making sure they're learning at least the industry standards, right?
So how deep are you willing to go? Like, I mean, I'm sure you have levels. Mm-hmm. Whether you're you're not an apprenticeship school, you're not.
We actually do that as well. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're going to teach apprenticeship, there's these blocks. But if someone comes in off the street to take an APR course.
Yep.
Is there like an intermediary? Is there a novice, or is there like super advanced? Like, do you have a few options?
So basically, the way it works is for our welding technique and our metal fabricator program. Both programs, you don't need to have a whole history of being a welder beforehand, right? So those are both our entry level courses. We have upgrade courses. So one of them being our pipe welder course, and another one. So the weld tech is almost like the base course. So you take your welding technique course, you can upgrade that to a metal fabricator course. And from the metal fabricator course, you can upgrade that to a pipe course or to a TIG course. So currently we're working on creating a curriculum to have a full-blown TIG upgrade course.
Okay.
So even somebody who might have come in off the street, if they had, let's say maybe they didn't have college experience, but they had tickets and they understand welding, they understand the fundamentals of it, we can even make them do an aptitude test. Basically, they can then take a TIG course, right? And that's something that I don't see offered very often.
It's niche. It's
very niche, yeah.
I have a double-sided opinion on TIG because I didn't do a lot of it in my career.
Right.
I was a mining guy. You're not pulling out the TIG torch in the mine. That's not a thing, right?
Or the steel plant.
No, it's not happening. And when I started teaching, they're like, okay, well, you got to teach all the TIG courses too. And I was like, so like, of course, I'm there after hours practicing, right? I don't want to look like an idiot in front of the students, right? And I'm going through this TIG stuff, and all I'm thinking is that this is never going to last. In 20 years, this isn't even going to be a thing.
And then you look 20 years later, and you're like, wow, it's still a thing.
It's still a thing.
Yeah.
So that's where I've been stuck. I've always thought, like, it's too slow. There's way faster ways of doing any of these processes. And now with laser welding, that's going to cut out, like, half the TIG work because it's in the same sphere.
The biggest thing is getting it certified, right? I think that's going to be the real... And you know what? Maybe by the time I actually get this curriculum up and running, it might be a laser and TIG welding class. It might just be all specialty welding, right? So the biggest thing I find with TIG is that you could do the work that, other than with the laser, the work that just can't be done at more of an affordable cost.
Yeah.
So as of right now, the lasers are pretty still...
quite expensive.
Yeah. Like, they're not crazy expensive.
But you can set up a TIG in your garage for under $200.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Like, and you can do really nice stainless welds with it.
And if you even wanted to get into aluminum, you're under $3,000.
That's right.
So
that's
I mean,
right.
It's all about what you actually want to accomplish, right? And where TIG might still come in handy is like maybe the thicker stuff that has to be 100% pure, right? It can't be full of impurities like stick welding or maybe even MIG welding where you get 40 fines every once in a blue moon.
Yeah.
It's definitely a higher deposition rate, but it's...
there's little places for TIG.
Yeah.
For me, I'm on Instagram. I see these TIG masters.
It's fun.
Right? And they're just crushing it. And
Yeah.
They're becoming rich doing TIG. And I'm just like, how? Like it's different places. I interviewed Dabs, right?
Yeah,
and
he's cool.
His first job was full-time TIG welding. I'm like, where are these full-time TIG jobs? Like, I apparently in the U.S. there's lots of them.
I was just going to say, I have friends that own pipeline trucks that were down in like Alberta area, but they've worked in the States a lot.
Yeah.
And one of them specifically knew that I did a lot of TIG welding. And he called me and he's like, hey, man, I want you to come to this job with me. We're going to both work off my rig and make crazy money. And I was like, well, I'm really busy. I don't think I can make it. I would love to do that. It'd be so much fun.
Yeah.
Like, I never really used my TIG welding skills to actually go and
field work.
Yeah, to do field work. Exactly. And even people will come to my school and they'll be like, hey, man, like I can't really do this job at home because I don't have a garage like you here and I don't have a shop to pull this aluminum trailer into, whatever it might be, but I got to fix this thing. And spool gun sucks, so I'd like to do it with TIG. And I'm like, why can't you do it in the field? And he's like, well, I mean, you know how it is, like gas, so it kept blowing away. I'm like, yeah, just grab a curtain or something. Like, it's very... And He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, come to the school, grab one of my curtains, throw it around
You take one glove, you put it here.
Yeah.
You take one glove, you put it here, and you weld it.
Yeah, and honestly, it doesn't take much. Like,
Yeah.
you use a diffusing lens, it'll spread out your argon enough to be able to do a lot of things in the field. A lot of the time, if it's not even windy out, it doesn't make a difference. Like,
No.
and you'll
no.
know as soon as you run out of gas, your weld will turn black. If it's
You'll see
aluminum
it.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So you grind it out, you redo it just like you would if you lost gas welding on anything else. Right?
Yeah, and it's not like it takes a long time to grind aluminum.
And it's on a trailer, man. You're not trying to stack dimes on this thing. to
Yeah,
make it
it's,
look
it's not going to space.
No, exactly. And even if it was, you'd probably still be okay. Like,
Now, you got the courses running. You got your blocks figured out for the metal fab and for the specialty welding and stuff like that. How do you recruit? How do you fill the classes? How do you get out there?
So honestly, I do a lot of not even talking at high schools, but I go to a lot of high schools and show them, like, this is how you pass the CWB test. These are my little tricks that work for me. Like, and I don't necessarily sell myself. I just go out and show them, like, we are a thing. We are here. If you want to come here, we will teach you.
Yeah.
And we usually explain to them why we're different than everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
What sets us apart. And, of course, all these younger generation, they see the welding that's being done at, like, Western Welding Academy, for example. They are an amazing school. They push to do the field welding applications. They push to do the things that just don't get done at a college. Right. And I see that, and I see inspiration. I'm like, yes, we need that in our students, right? So we, like I was saying earlier, we do confined space training, and like make sure they understand that they're going to be working in these kinds of elements, and that's where the money happens, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can go work in a shop and you can make a good living for yourself, but if you want to chase the dollar like they always see on Instagram, you have to go and out there, and you have to be good.
Well, I was just talking about that with the fabricator guys. I was on their podcast, and they talked about the concept of the buckets of money as a kid. You're in school, and you're like, you're gonna make so much money, and it's always like more experienced welders were like, well, yeah, but
you're at the right place at the right time with
the right
attitude,
skill,
and you don't show up late on the first day. And
there's a lot of pieces that come together for that, and those jobs are also highly competitive. The second you make a mistake or you have a failed X-ray, next guy's in.
Yep.
So like it's a very exhausting, hard job.
It's a hard life.
It's a hard
stressful.
life. Yeah, and most of us who have gone down the path of welding end up making less money when we get older because we find the right job.
We're happy.
Right? We're
where
happy.
We are. Yes.
And plus, we've made good money for most of our lives already. We don't got a lot of debt. We don't got a lot of worry about that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And I really try to teach my students that. And I feel like they don't always understand that, yes, I had a super good opportunity when I first became a welder. And I was a pipe welder. I got humbled. So, I mean, I had already learned my lesson the hard way.
Yeah.
I had to be good. I had to show up early every day no matter what. I don't care what anybody else is doing. You're your own person, right?
Yeah.
Don't make any of your own problems the boss's problems. Like, oh, my car broke down. Doesn't matter. Call a cab, leave your truck there, man. Like,
That's not him.
No, like, show up on time no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Plan ahead. So, your truck is not a great truck, then just don't plan to go and be there just on, like, for me, 15 minutes is on time. 15 minutes early is on time, right?
Well, by the time you suit up and figure out what's going on and have a coffee, you need time to prep for work.
100%.
Yeah.
So I try to teach all that, like, to our students, make sure they understand, like, it's way better for you to get that job in an entry-level job and work your way up the ladder rather than starting at the very top. If you start at the top and you're fresh out of school,
You're
all
capped.
eyes are on you.
Yeah.
And, everybody's going to be paying attention to every single thing you're doing, and they're going to be judging you for that. You're not going to have fun. There's no camaraderie at that point. And that is the big thing about the trades. I don't know about yourself, but that was the biggest thing I loved about the trades, the camaraderie.
We're a family.
100%. You help each other. You work with each other. You spend most of your life with those guys.
That's right.
And I still keep in touch with all the people that I work with all across Canada.
I literally run into guys here
that
I worked with 20 years ago,
exactly.
30 years
it's
ago.
So much.
The community's just always been around.
Exactly.
I preach it all the time. Like when I'm looking for, young people are looking for advice from me as, an old established welder who has maybe the best job in Canada right now for welding, and being like, how did you get to where you were? It's like, network. Like, I mean, you gotta be friendly. You gotta talk to people. If someone needs a hand, help them. And when you need a hand, ask. Like, you
100%.
don't just sit there in your bubble.
No, it's the worst thing you can do. And like, I mean, as you start traveling too, you meet people that might be the project manager on the next job site, or they might be, the piping supervisor.
They might start their own company and then be a CEO someday,
yeah,
right? Like,
and then now they're calling you and saying like, hey, listen, I need you to do this specialty thing. I remember you were really good at that. And you're like, oh, great. Like, and we had fun working together, so that's a bonus, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's definitely a big thing to network in our community, or as far as welders and even pipe welders, pipe fitters, anything like that, because as you're always going to run into something in your career where the work dries up. And you might get super lucky and never have that happen, or you might have it happen a year after you started in the trade.
Yeah. Or you might come out of school. This happened right after COVID. We had students coming out of a welding program, and literally there's not even like companies open for them to work at.
Yes.
It's like, man, I felt bad for those students. Like,
yes.
That's a rough spot to start.
It sucks. And that's one big thing we try to help with a lot with at APR is that trying to get them that first job is the hardest part, right?
It is, yeah.
I remember basically handing out 60 resumes when I first finished college to try and get a welding job. I wanted to be a pipe welder.
Yeah.
So I might have handed out 60 in the pipe fitters union, but like maybe one or two to other companies that I might have worked with, but I wanted to be a pipe welder. Right?
Yeah.
So essentially, with these students, I tell them on day one, how you are in this class, I'm your number one reference. So I am honest to every single employer that hires their students. If they call me and ask me any questions, I'm honest. So were they on time? Were they late? Were they, how was their attitude? Did they want to learn? Did they want to be there? Like, if they can actually be involved when they're a student, they know when they're not getting paid. When they know that when they get them as an employee, they'll be 10 times better.
That's right.
Because they're there for a purpose. They want to better themselves. They're there for more than the money at that point. Yeah. Right?
I had a guy come to me today, and he said, hey, I'm a small shop owner here in Southern Ontario. We are having a hell of a time trying to find good young welders. We feel like we put ads out, and we just can't seem to find any good young welders right now. And I said, okay, well, what are you doing different to find them? Like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, we put an ad out. We put an ad out in the paper looking for welders. I'm like, is there a local welding program in your area? He's like, yeah, we got 2 schools in our area. Do you know when they graduate? No. Did you ask? No. Well, go introduce yourself to the instructors at the school. Ask them when they graduate. Go back to that school the week before they graduate. Ask who the top 3 students were. They'll tell you.
100% they will.
And then poach.
Yeah.
It's the NHL, man. Grab the All-Stars right away. Like, don't sit and wait for the All-Stars to come to you. Someone's going to get them.
The All-Stars aren't going to come to you.
They're not.
They're already gone.
They're already gone.
Yeah.
I taught for 8 years, and every best student I ever had a job before he was done school.
100%.
They all got poached.
100%.
Get in there and poach, right?
So, and even to elaborate on that a little bit, I tell my students, like, if you're going to be in a booth, you want to be presentable, right? You want to be, like, presented. I don't mean that, like, not having a ripped sweater. We're welders. They get ripped. They get tore. They get burns in them, whatever. But what I mean is your cables, your machine settings, like, have everything neat, have everything tidy. When you're wrapping up at the end of the day, even if you go to grab a machine that somebody else used before you, don't wrap the cable super tight around the reel that's in there. Like, you want to wrap it up nice so that the guy can just grab it, drag it out into his booth. You have nice parallel cables. Because when these employers come around the shop, they're going to go through and they're going to say, hey, who's that guy? He looks like he's working. Like, I don't even care what his welds look like at this point. Look at this cables. Look how neat he is. How tidy. He's not a safety hazard.
He's not going to trip. He's not going to wipe out.
And then they say, like, who is that guy, and what do his welds look like, and what kind of personality does he have? Like, okay, I think that kid would fit in our shop good. Like, he might not be the best welder in the shop, but he definitely has the best attitude. Yeah. He's neat. He's tidy.
His name's Johnny OCD, but whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things that it's the first thing they notice as an employer. Like, you're looking for safe workers, right? So they're going to be safe, and they have a decent welding capability. They're only going to learn from there, right? Like, it's a fundamental thing that they learn, like building the, right?
Yeah. Well, and how useful you are in a shop. Like, sometimes you make choices in life that make you harder to hire, right? And that's just life. Like, for myself, tattoos. I used to have a bunch of piercings. I used to have a bright red mohawk. 18 years old, trying to get not so easy to find work when you're looking like a skid, right?
Right.
But then it's like, okay, if I'm gonna look this way, I had to take stock of myself and be like, I gotta prove in other ways that I'm worth having.
Yeah.
So I was the person that would stay 5 minutes after everybody and just sweep everyone's area.
100%.
I already got the broom in my hand. I already cleaned my area. I might as well just give a quick run of the whole side. I wasn't at a shop 2 weeks when someone's like, why are you doing that? It's like, oh, it just looks nice. Like, they're like, my fave.
Yeah,
like, done.
love that,
Like,
yes.
you're in.
Yeah.
You're in. And then I got to go, like, on the shop runs and on the fun stuff
Yeah.
because they knew that I wasn't going to make a mess and I was going to be clean and tidy. And that stuff is very noticeable.
Well, even just as far as like doing the shop runs, for example, how many employees have you seen, like maybe not necessarily working for you, but even working with, that they're like, man, I'm just going to make a Timmy's run while I'm out, and I'm just going to go to the store because I got to get that thing for my wife. Like, I was supposed to go after work. Well, no, man, you're on the clock. Like, treat it as such and respect your employer, right?
Yeah.
Don't abuse them because they might not notice it this time or even next time, but eventually they will be getting layoffs are coming, and, they're like, oh, I remember he used to take like 3 times longer just to go to the welding supply store, to go to Canadian Welding Supply and grab a couple boxes of rod or air liquid to grab some cast. Like, it's just one of those things that there's no reason for it, and people do notice. And
like I've always said, and this is a harsh opinion that a lot of people don't like to hear, but there's enough welding work for every welder in Canada right now. If you run into a welder that's not working, he did something wrong. Like, something happened.
I brought that up recently, actually. I've had a very similar conversation recently with somebody I know, and I basically said, there's so much work out there, and we get so many phone calls in a week looking for welders, looking for fabricators, looking for somebody with specific tickets.
Yeah.
And I've said many of times, if there's people telling you that they're not working and they can't find work, it's because they're not trying to find work. And
there's something going on there.
They're purposely not working.
Yeah.
Maybe they're being too picky about where they're working or how they're going to be working or where they're going to be, what kind of welding they might be doing. Or maybe they want to be a specialty welder, like the TIG welding thing. It's hard to find a job like that because there's a lot of shops that refuse to do it, specifically because it's hard to find somebody, and then that person knows their value.
Yeah, you're not getting them cheap.
No, exactly.
And nor should you.
No, exactly.
Right?
They've worked hard to get those skills honed in. But I mean, at the same time, maybe the employer just isn't prepared for that. They don't want to take on that kind of work, right? Yeah.
Now, one of the last points that I'd like to bring up is I got noted here that you guys are actually a certified Aboriginal business.
Yes.
So did that come with, or was that something that you guys built up?
That was something I implemented into the business almost immediately once I took over. So myself, I am a status card holder. So I have I'm part of the Mississauga band, and basically, I mean, I seen the benefit of being an Aboriginally certified company. There's a lot of benefits to even our students getting hired from that, right? So it's
does that tap you into funding opportunities for your students easier, or does that? Because I know it's a mess of politics for funding.
It kind of does. So it sort of does and sort of doesn't. So, I mean, in the sense that students, it helps them when they call me and they're like, hey, we got this guy coming to your school or this girl coming to your school, and she said she needs a laptop. Is this true? And I could, they trust when I say yes or no, right?
Yeah,
Or like it could help, but that's not necessarily mandatory for them or whatever it might be, right? Or when they say like, did they need the $700 welding shield? No, they don't need the $700.
No.
They can go to Walmart.
Will go far.
They go to Walmart and buy a lens if they really wanted to. Like, it'll help them probably as they're learning. But it's one of those things. I feel like it's more of a trust factor with the reserves around. And I'm kind of hoping that it helps get us further ahead of the public college. That's the biggest thing being a private career college. Is everything is riding on us, right, as personal owners.
Yeah, you're not guaranteed funding. There's not money coming from the government.
No, exactly. And I mean, I've been taught many of the times nothing's guaranteed ever.
Mm-hmm.
However, I feel like eventually it will help us get our facility up into the more technological. I can't even say. I'm going to give up on that word there. But advanced, right? Into more advanced equipment that helps for teaching. It helps for preparing them better for the field. And it helps them, as students, better prepare them for what they're going to be up against as soon as they graduate school, right?
What's your ratio, like, of Aboriginal versus non-Indigenous for students? Like,
okay. So it's honestly all over the place. We've had one class that was like 60% filled with Aboriginal students and Indigenous students. And then we've had other classes that have none. And this is like recent and not so recent. So this is like it's kind of all over the map. And
so there's not like a direct pathway. Like, I'm envisioning you becoming like, hey, we're in a certified, Aboriginal center. And then every reserve in the area is going to be like telling their kids, go there. but it doesn't really play out like that.
Not yet. I
Not
feel
yet,
like a lot
yeah.
of people don't even know that we are Aboriginal
Right,
certified
right.
yet. And also, I feel like people are having a hard time realizing that we're an option. You know,
Yeah.
so we're still getting out there. We're still pushing to make sure that people know we're around.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's still up to them to decide where they're going to go for schooling. However, I think that it's definitely a possibility for our future that we kind of partner with these communities. And one of my personal goals with owning the school is involved with trying to get almost a training facility that's portable. Like, I don't know.
Like a mobile
training center,
Yeah.
like a CCAN with a 6-pack of welders, a
Yeah,
classroom
and
in
there's
the
a
back.
few around the country.
And
They're
there
pretty
is.
dope.
Yeah, they're sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what my plan is I would really love to get into these communities and provide the training so they don't have to leave. I think that's the hardest part in these communities.
We got to
that I
talk
see.
because we are trying to do the same thing, and we're trying to
amazing.
partner up with people.
Well,
And we
yes.
have connections for like Indigenous funding for stuff like that. Well, there's a project in Saskatchewan, northern communities. There's one in Ontario, I think.
Right.
We just helped fund one in Halifax.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Right
so
on.
that is something that I think is also very key because, first of all, some of these northern communities or Indigenous communities, they don't even have the power supplies that would even run welders. Let's say I could magically bring in 10 welders. They don't even have the power infrastructure to plug them in.
Right. And you see that often.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
and I mean, I can just imagine having a couple big diesel welders that not only could weld off of the welder itself, but you also have welders that could plug in off of those welders and run basically the same.
The shop, yeah.
literally.
Yeah, like I started a school in Africa. I started with 5 gen sets. It basically ran
Oh, wow.
the school until I got power piped
That's
in.
amazing.
Yeah, like
That
I
is
mean,
super cool.
you just and I didn't at the time I didn't know you could stack gen sets, but you can stack gen sets.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, we've had a wonderful interview. We're our time's up. Thank you very much, Jeremy, for being on the show with us. Let people know how to get a hold of APR Welding Academy and how to get enrolled.
Yeah, okay. So APR Welding Academy is on all social media platforms. We do a lot of funny videos as well. We like to be involved in the community and the trends that are going out there. Honestly, it's just fun to run this company. We have a blast. We have a great team. We have a website, aprweldingacademy.com. So if you guys want to enroll, we are more than welcome to show you our facility. We're more than welcome to even give you pointers, even if it's not necessarily something you want to get into. We can always give you advice, and we're not biased. You know, we want to see people succeed more than anything, and not just by coming to our school. Right?
That's right.
There's a lot of people that'll call us, and they just want to learn how to maybe even just do a hobby course. We offer hobby courses too. Like, they don't need a full college course. They just want to do stuff in their garage, right? So,
yeah, that's fair.
I mean, there's lots of ways to get a hold of us. You can find us on any social media platform, and anytime you call the school, you're going to be speaking to my wife, Alyssa. She's awesome. She actually has as much knowledge as I do by now.
Awesome.
Just she asks me a million questions a day, and then she remembers it all, right? So it's impressive what she can remember.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Fabtech show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, and for the people that have been following along, all the information for APR Welding Academy will be online with the release of this podcast. We're also going to be doing many more podcasts here at Fabtech Canada over the next couple days. We're tired, and we're going to push through, and we're going to bring you the best content.
16-hour mental days.
Yeah, 16-hour mental days. We're going hard.
Yeah.
All right, so stay tuned for the next episode. Catch you later.
We hope you enjoyed the show.